Welcome, history nerds, historical TV drama addicts, and anyone who just wandered in here because you saw the words Conqueror of Jerusalem. Today, we're dusting off our scrolls of skepticism and venturing into the crossroads of legend, drama, and history that is Saladin Eyyubi, Conqueror of Jerusalem, episodes 8 through 14. This is a Q&A episode, meaning you've brought the questions, I've brought the sass, and together we're going to separate fact from fiction faster than a trebuchet flings a rock. We'll talk about what the show gets right and where it takes wild creative liberties and which parts are pure historically flavored soap opera. In these episodes, it's not just about knights clashing swords or Salah al-Din giving motivational speeches. We also got to sift through the baggage, the tired Sunni versus Shia narrative that gets oversimplified into a soap opera grudge match, and the all too familiar Jewish villain stereotype that medieval dramas seem unable to retire. Underneath that, though, is the real gold, the cultural diversity of the region. This was the crossroads of Muslims, Christians, Jews, and even pre-Islamic pagans of the region, living, trading, and politicking in ways far more complex than the flat tropes TV sometimes leans on. So let's jump right into this episode. Question 1. Who does Rashid al-Din Sinan serve, the Fatimid or the Abbasid? Alright, let's talk about Rashid al-Din Sinan, or as the TV show calls him, the Master of Mountains. Now, fun fact, that title was actually recycled. He inherited the whole old man in the mountain brand from his predecessor. Basically, medieval times already had sequels, reboots, and bad franchising. Historically, Sinan wasn't anybody's sidekick. Not the Fatimids, not the Abbasids. He was a Nizari Ismaili leader doing his own thing in Syria, while both the Fatimid Caliphate in Cairo and the Abbasid Caliphate in Baghdad were falling apart faster than a Netflix series canceled after one season. I mean, who says cancel culture is a new thing? The Nizaris had already split from the Fatimids back in 1094 over a messy succession crisis. One son versus an associate, and yes, it was as awkward as it sounds. That family drama basically gave birth to the entire Nizari Ismaili sect that Sinan belonged to. The Abbasids, being Sunni, stuck their noses up at all Shia groups, but they had a special burning loathing for the Ismailis. The Sunni saw them as heretics. Sinan set up shop in the mountains at Masya Forest. Think of it as the Syrian branch of the assassin network, while the headquarters was in Persia at Alamut. From there, he ran the local franchise, leading the Hashashin, who targeted both Crusader and Muslim leaders because, hey, equal opportunity assassination was kind of their brand. And oh, did Sinan and Salah al-Din have beef? Not just regular beef, assassination attempts on each other beef. Imagine living in a world where you couldn't even go on a nice hunting excursion without wondering if Sinan had a knife with your name on it. To make things spicier, Sinan may have cut deals with Crusader leaders like Bohemond III of Antioch. Yup, nothing screams loyalty to the Ummah like teaming up with the Crusaders. Sinan wasn't in it for Sunni or Shia politics though. He was all about Nizari survival and power. Basically, he was the medieval version of playing 4D chess while everyone else was stuck playing checkers. Now in this TV series, they've got him sneaking around as an Abbasid envoy, basically moonlighting as a Nizari spy, playing all sides, scheming like he's auditioning for Game of Thrones Damascus Edition. Problem is, we don't have any historical record of him ever doing that. So far, his motives in the show are murky, but it sure looks like he's plotting to weaken everyone so he can swoop in and call dibs on the region. Is this historically accurate? Not really. Is it good drama? Sure. I mean, who wouldn't watch a mountain-dwelling cult leader with a side hustle and political espionage? Question 2. Why do the followers of Master of Mountains appear to be worshipping him? Isn't this un-Islamic? Okay, first thing first. I'm not your local imam or a member of the ulema, so I'm not going to hand out religious verdicts here. What I can do is give you the historical and cultural context, which is honestly way more entertaining than watching me pretend I'm qualified to issue fatwas on YouTube. So, the Nizari Ismailis, yes, the same crew that medieval chroniclers dubbed the Hashashin. These folks were not your average Shia. Think of them as the highly misunderstood cousins of the Islamic world, the ones who show up at the family reunion with a philosophy degree, a mystical worldview, and occasionally knives. The Nizaris believed in a continuous line of living imams descended from Ali and Fatima. Their imam wasn't just a religious leader, but a kind of living manifestation of divine knowledge. To them, the imam was a cosmic intermediary, a bearer of divine light, a spiritual GPS with no off switch. To Sunnis, though, this looked dangerously like deifying a human, which was a massive theological red flag to them. Here's the twist. Nizaris leaned heavily on esoteric interpretation, the hidden symbolic meanings of scripture over the literal stuff. So while Sunnis and Twelvers were focused on law and rituals, the Nizaris might say, sure, prayer and fasting matter, but the real point is the inner truth behind them. That made sense inside their own system, but to the Sunni mainstream, it screamed, heretics abandoning God's law. Now add in the politics. Rashid al-Din Sinan ran the Syrian branch of the assassins out of Masyaf Fortress, which was a wider network led by the Alamut in Persia. The Nizaris were infamous for targeted assassinations of both Crusaders and Muslims, viziers, generals, even the legendary Sunni statesman Nizam al-Mulk. So yeah, you can see why Sunni dynasties like the Seljuks basically had him at the top of the most wanted list. Because of all this, outsiders often saw the Nizaris as worshipping their leader, when in reality they viewed their imam as the channel to divine truth. To Sunnis, that looked like borderline idolatry. To the Nizaris, it was loyalty to a cosmic guide. And to Crusaders, writing rumors back to Europe, it was great PR for inventing the word assassin. The Crusaders also took full advantage of this division to provoke these sects against each other, preventing them from becoming a powerful sledgehammer against them if they ever realized the power of unification. But I digress. So when you see followers of the Master of Mountains bowing, swooning, or treating him like the medieval rock star of esoteric Islam in the show, that's the TV dramatization of a real historical tension. One group's mystical devotion looked like another group's heresy. Question 3. How many times will the Crusaders fall for Salah al-Din sneaking into their strongholds dressed like a Crusader or Templar? Apparently, infinity. Look, I get it. Everyone's clanking around in identical tin cans with crosses painted on them, but seriously, how many times can the same gag work? At some point, the Crusaders basically turned into a medieval Scooby-Doo episode. Let's see who's really under that helmet. Oh no, it's Salah al-Din again. I mean, those helmets might protect your skull, but they do absolutely nothing for facial recognition. It's like the medieval version of password security. Everyone just used 1, 2, 3 and then got shocked when someone guessed it. Salah al-Din and his Ghazis must have been laughing their chainmail off like, watch this, we're about to unlock Antioch with the same trick again. So yeah, drawback of wearing those metal cans on your head, they make you invincible to arrows in the forehead, but totally vulnerable to being punked by the guy you're supposed to be fighting. Question 4. Why is Karatagan always drinking milk? Is that goat's milk? I don't see any cows. Alright, let's clear this up before the guessing game takes a wild turn into a historical channel special, right between Ancient Aliens Built Göbekli Tepe and The Secret Life of Cheese. Karatagan isn't sipping drinking goat's milk. He's downing fermented mare's milk, better known as Kumis. Think of it as the Turkic and Mongol version of a protein shake. Sour, foamy, slightly alcoholic, and with enough probiotics to terrify Activia commercials everywhere. Kumis wasn't just a beverage, it was the drink of the steppe. Warriors chugged it before battles, shamans poured it out for spirits, and nomads believed it was basically blessed by Tangri, the sky god himself. In other words, this wasn't just milk, it was cosmic Gatorade. And it wasn't just folklore fluff. Kumis had legit medicinal uses. By the 19th century, Russian hospitals were actually prescribing Kumis therapy for tuberculosis, nervous disorders, and indigestion. Meanwhile, Karatagan is pounding it like a frat boy at a kegger, except instead of beer pong, he's out here carving ball statues for his wolf pack's graves. And speaking of milk, this reminded me of the Elder Scrolls. If you ever played Skyrim, you know the Nords love to call the other races milk drinkers as an insult. But here's the kicker. The Turks and Mongols were some of the biggest milk drinkers in history. So if a Nord ever called Karatagan a milk drinker, he'd probably just flex, pour them a foamy cup of Kumis, and say, yeah, well this milk allows me to live to 120 and whoop your ass, dog. Now here's why I love Karatagan. He's basically the chaotic neutral wild card of the series. He's not fully converted to Islam like most of his tribe. He still clings to Tangriism and still adheres to old school customs like raising wolf totems and planting stone enemy balls on graves. He's stuck halfway between shamanistic sky god rituals and the Islamic world around him, and he makes it hilarious. Case in point, when he tells his Alp to carve a bauble statue holding a red pike in honor of Victoria because apparently she's a terrifying adversary, I about lost it. Who else turns their enemies into stone lawn ornaments as a brag about how goat they were in life? Because the more bauble statues a fallen wolf had placed on their grave memorialized them as a certified badass. So yeah, Karatagan is basically the wolfy milk drinking statue collecting anti-hero you didn't know you needed. He's chaotic good, hilarious, and honestly, becoming my favorite character faster than Saladin can sneak into a Crusader camp disguised as a Templar. Question 5. Can you explain Victoria's character? I can't find any historical mention of her. Ah, yes, Victoria, the mysterious sister of Baldwin III, who appears in this series like she just wandered in from the medieval fanfiction multiverse. Spoiler? She didn't exist. In reality, Baldwin III's actual sisters were Sibylla and Matilda, and both were nuns, not exactly storming the throne of Jerusalem with eyeliner and a sword. Now, Baldwin III did have a wife, Theodora. She was 13 when they married, because medieval marriage customs were basically one long yikes. She never had children by him, which was probably a blessing, and many speculate the marriage was more political than personal. When Baldwin III died suddenly, this lack of heirs caused a succession crisis. So yeah, the real story had enough drama without needing Victoria to cosplay her way into power. In the show, Victoria is written as Baldwin III's only sister and even usurps the throne of Jerusalem. Historically, never happened. Baldwin had brothers who would have been way ahead of any sisters in line anyways. And honestly, medieval Europe wasn't exactly known for its enthusiasm about women ruling. Often the throne or political influence usually ended up in the hands of a husband, which kind of explains why Victoria never actually marries the love of her life, Count Gabriel, even after they reunite, after everyone believes Saladin killed him. I mean, she really had no obstacle in her way at that point. I guess TV drama weddings are expensive too. I guess it was also TV shorthand for, I like power and I'm not about to hand it over to some dude just because he's got a title and shiny armor. And fair enough, plenty of real queens pulled that move too. Elizabeth I of England, for example, basically ghosted half the crowned heads of Europe to keep her throne and power all to herself. So, historically accurate? Not at all. Victoria's basically the writers saying, what if Baldwin III had a power-hungry sister who was one part Cersei Lannister and one part historical improv? Sure, I'm here for it. Question 6. I read that strangling by bowstring was a popular execution at this time. was it? Strangulation by bowstring, or sometimes silk cord, if you wanted the deluxe package, was a real and relatively common method of execution, but it wasn't the universal medieval go-to. You wouldn't walk into Paris in 1150 and expect to see every criminal being quietly garroted with a bowstring behind the bakery. No, this was more of a specialty of the Seljuks, Ottomans, Mamluks, and other Islamic dynasties. Why? Because in Islamic custom, preserving the body for burial mattered. Beheading or butchering someone left a mess, which was frowned upon. So for nobles or royals, the bowstring was considered more dignified. Imagine that. Congratulations, you're still going to die, but at least you won't be dripping all over the carpets. The Turkic and Mongol traditions also liked non-bloody executions. Nobles especially weren't supposed to bleed out like commoners. So you'd get the bowstring, the lasso, or sometimes even the felt rope. The Ottomans carried this into the early modern era too. In fact, silk cord strangulation was so standard for palace intrigue that it was practically the HR policy of the sultans. Bad day at court? Whoops, here comes a dude with a cord. Now, medieval Europe, whole different vibe. Europeans loved their drama. Executions were more like public theater. Hangings, beheadings, burnings, drawing and quartering. If you wanted a discreet execution in Europe, you were probably out of luck. Spain did sometimes use the garrote though, but that came with heavy Andalusian Islamic influence. So yes, the bowstring was real, but it wasn't about being sneaky assassins. It was about symbolism. No blood, no mess, still respectful for burial, but everyone still knew you'd been executed. The medieval version of, it's not you, it's just politics. And speaking of bowstrings, let's pivot to Bozu, the archer. If anyone could strangle you with a bowstring and shoot an arrow through your helmet in the same breath, it'd be him. Can we take a moment to admire this melee combatant archer? He is absolutely fabulous. Question 7. Can you explain the Islamic funeral customs represented in this TV series? Absolutely. Now, funerals in medieval Islamic society weren't about spectacle. They were deeply rooted in Sharia and tradition, and most practices came straight from the Sunnah. So if you're expecting a Game of Thrones style funeral pyre, nope. Cremation is strictly forbidden in Islam. Fire was for cooking kebabs, not your relatives. Here's how it actually went. First, the body was washed, usually by family or community members of the same gender, with soap, water, and sometimes scented oils. It had to be done an odd number of times, 3, 5, 7, because apparently even in death, math matters. The idea was to preserve modesty and respect. After that, the body got wrapped in plain white cloth. Nothing fancy, no jewels, no embroidered robes. Rich or poor, everyone got the same budget-friendly IKEA shroud. The point was equality in death. You can't take your gold stash into the afterlife, so why flaunt it on the way out? Everyone is equal before Allah. Then came the funeral prayer, performed in an open area, facing Mecca. Importantly, there was no bowing or prostration like in normal prayer. The burial happened fast, ideally within 24 hours. The body was placed on its right side, facing Mecca, in a grave that was simple and undecorated. Tombstones were modest. There are some very important people buried in tombs, but generally this wasn't often the case. Mourning usually lasted 3 days, though widows had a longer period, 4 months and 10 days, as prescribed in the Quran. Lavish mourning displays were discouraged, so no medieval Oscar-worthy grief performances, even though some people did it anyway. Instead, reciting Quran, giving charity, and praying for the deceased were encouraged. Now here's where it gets interesting for the show. Some Turkic customs slipped in, for example, placing a wooden plank over the body to protect it from the earth, or watering the grave after burial, a beautiful step tradition symbolizing life, renewal, and care. A dry grave might look like neglect, while a water one said, hey, we still care about this person. To outsiders, it might look superstitious, but Islam didn't forbid it as long as it wasn't idol worship territory. So when you see these customs in the series, remember, they're not just set dressing. They reflect centuries of belief about humility, equality, and respect in death. Honestly, medieval Islamic funerals were kind of the opposite of medieval European ones. Over there, you had public executions with firework-level gore and a lot of ceremony and pomp at funerals. Over here, you had quiet executions, quick burials, plain shrouds, and graves. Question 8. Who is Avram? Is he a real historical character? Short answer, no. Long answer, still no, with the extra no on top. Avram is a purely fictional character invented by the writers to add drama. In theory, he's supposed to be this wealthy, influential Jewish leader. In practice, he's written like a bargain bin mob boss with a posse of thugs. Historically, there's zero evidence of a Jewish figure like Avram backing Crusader efforts in the 12th century. Quite the opposite. Jewish communities suffered horribly at the hands of Crusaders. During the First Crusade in 1096, mobs wiped out entire Jewish populations in places like Mainz, Worms, and Cologne. Thousands of Jews were massacred before Crusaders even reached the Holy Land. So yeah, the idea of Jews teaming up with Crusaders is about as likely as Salah al-Din riding into battle on a unicycle. When the Crusaders captured Jerusalem in 1099, they didn't exactly pass out welcome baskets. They slaughtered Muslims, Jews, and even local West Asian and Byzantine Christians. To Crusaders, Jews were still branded as Christ killers, which meant mass persecution, not collaboration. Under Muslim rulers like Salah al-Din, on the other hand, Jews actually fared far better. When Salah al-Din retook Jerusalem in 1187, he reversed the Crusader expulsions and allowed Jews and Muslims alike to return and rebuild their communities. In cities like Cairo, Damascus, and Baghdad, Jewish communities were stable and often even thrived. So what's the problem with Avram? For me, this is the weakest character in the whole series so far. Most of the other minor Jewish characters are written realistically, but Avram and his crew, historically implausible, narratively unnecessary, and leaning uncomfortably close to dangerous stereotypes. Because here's the truth. The idea that Muslims and Jews have always been locked in internal conflict is a modern myth. For centuries, relations were relatively stable, especially under Islamic empires like the Ottomans. The real roots of modern tension lie in 19th and 20th century politics, Zionism, the collapse of the Ottoman Empire, and the British Mandate, not some imagined medieval blood feud. So when the show tosses in Avram as a scheming Jewish antagonist, it doesn't just miss the mark, it stabs historical accuracy in the back, assassin style, and then runs off cackling. I'd call it the writer's biggest misstep so far. Avram brings nothing meaningful to the table. He's not historical, he's not plausible, and he doesn't even add good drama. Honestly, the only accurate thing about him is that he makes me want to strangle the script with a bowstring, respectfully. Question 9. What was the meaning of Salah al-Din's dream? Alright, buckle up, because Salah al-Din's dream sequence is basically the medieval version of a Marvel crossover event. Prophets, martyrs, and legendary generals all cameo to remind him he is the chosen one. Eat your heart out, Doctor Strange. So first, Salah al-Din's dressed in all white, not because he's auditioning for a medieval boy band, but because in Islamic culture, white is loaded with symbolism. Muslims are wrapped in white shrouds when they die. No Gucci coffins, no gold trim, just a simple shroud reminding everyone that when you go, you leave the world with nothing but your deeds. It also represents purity, unity, humility, and equality before God. Basically, it's God's way of saying, nice chainmail, but you can't take it with you. In the dream, Salah al-Din enters Jerusalem in white and is welcomed by the martyrs who had been slaughtered by the Crusaders earlier in the series. They sing him a beautiful welcome song, which is less Disney musical number and more, thanks for avenging us, now can we clock out? Then they all disappear, leaving Salah al-Din standing there like, wait, guys, don't leave me hanging. Next, in comes Abu Ubaidah. legendary companion of the Prophet Muhammad, veteran of the conquest of Jerusalem in 637, and the poster child for humble, just leadership. Abu Ubaidah hands Salah al-Din Caliph Umar's sword, basically saying, "Congrats, kid, you're the sequel." Symbolically, he's passing the torch, or in this case, a very sharp torch. I thought it was especially poetic and symbolic when Abu Ubaidah said that martyrs have purified Jerusalem for its conquerors. This is a very powerful statement. He is saying the blood of the martyrs has purified Jerusalem for its conquerors. In another cameo, Aziz ibn Uvak. No, not a Marvel villain, though the name kinda sounds like one. He was an 11th century Turkic commander who conquered Jerusalem in 1073, a century before Salah al-Din. His career was, mixed. He captured cities, grabbed Jerusalem, tried to invade Egypt, epically failed, and then got executed by his own side. Tough break, tough break. Still, in Salah al-Din's dream, he shows up, shrugs off the whole died horribly part, and gifts Salah al-Din his shield. So Salah al-Din gets a sword from Abu Ubaidah and a shield from Aziz. Dream loot unlocked. It's basically God's way of handing him the Liberator of Jerusalem starter pack. Together, these two legends tell him he's the one prophesied to retake the city. And while this prophecy wasn't in the Quran or a strongly authenticated hadith, many Muslims in the 12th century did believe a just, pious ruler would liberate Jerusalem. Salah al-Din's Sufi leanings, personal piety, and uncanny knack for uniting rival Muslim factions made him the perfect candidate for that role. The dream closes with Salah al-Din praying in Al-Aqsa alongside Abu Ubaidah and Aziz. They're led by an unidentified imam, faceless and mysterious. Many interpret this as a symbolic stand-in for the Prophet Muhammad, which is why the series doesn't show him. So yeah, the dream isn't just mystical fluff. It's history, symbolism, and propaganda all rolled into one. And not all propaganda is bad. When done right, it inspires collective action for positive change. Something to think about. So, that's where we'll leave it for this Q&A. We've untangled the symbolism, poked holes in the historical creative liberties, and hopefully made sense of a few things the show decided not to bother explaining. If there's one takeaway, it's that history doesn't actually need much dressing up. The real stories are already political enough, bloody enough, and weird enough on their own. So thanks for sticking around, and keep the questions coming, and I'll keep sorting through the chaos with a mix of research and sarcasm. See you in the next round. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. Think of it as paying your Baylor Bay gift of loyalty, except instead of coins and sheep, I just want your clicks. Far cheaper and less smelly.